Alright, oops, I didn't put the section. So this is just 1, 2. Alright, we change, whoops, daisy. Alright, let's change colors of my pen, and then we'll be ready to go. Alright. Alright, what did I say we're doing? Absolute value. So let's just write that down. Absolute value. The very latest, you guys did this in Algebra 1, didn't you? Okay, you might have done it in pre-algebra, maybe even like in basic arithmetic in middle school. I'm not really sure when they first teach this, but point is, you've seen this before, haven't you? Okay, absolute value. Now, basically, what does that mean? I just want you to get an idea of what absolute value means. Remember back in the day, did these little number lines? All right, let's say zeros right here, 1, 2, 3. We'll just make it pretty basic here. Won't get too crazy with it. Right, there's our number line, and basically what it means is the absolute value of a number is how far away that number is from 0. Right, that's what it means to be absolute value. So if I put a point right here, how many places, how many units away is this from 0? It's 3. Now, it's a positive 3, correct? But I don't really, when I say how far something is, if I say to walk a certain distance or to go a certain distance, if I just tell you the distance, it doesn't really tell you anything about the direction, doesn't it? It just says how far. All right, that's what absolute value basically means, okay, in a general sense, okay, how far that you go. So if I went to -3, that's a completely different number, isn't it? Positive 3 and -3 are two completely different numbers. But what does it mean to be absolute value? It means how far is that number away from what? Away from 0. So how far, forgetting direction, right? Just how far would you walk? How many units away is this from 0? 3. That's right. So when we talk about absolute value, the absolute value of positive 3 is what? 3. The absolute value of -3 is 3. Because what is it telling you? It's telling you how far away, or it's talking about the length or the distance if you want to think of it like that. How far away from 0 is that particular number? So we have a little symbol for absolute value. Do you remember that? Yeah, the little straight up and down lines. Good. Alright, so that's the symbol. Those two little lines on the outside right there, that means absolute value. So what is it telling you? It says, how far away is this number from 0? And how far away is it? It's just 3 units away, isn't it? Or inches or centimeters, meters, whatever you're using. Okay, it's 3 units, it's the best thing to say, away from 0. So the absolute value of 3 is 3. But we also said the absolute value of -3. It's not the greatest. Ooh, my 3's ugly. Sorry, I'm a little weird on this. There, that looks better. Okay, I'm much happier now. Alright, so what's the absolute value of -3? How far away is -3 from 0? Well, 3 places, isn't it? Alright, again, absolute value doesn't have anything to do with direction. The negative says, oh, you're moving to the left. Positive means you move to the right. Okay, if you had a y-axis, positive would go up, negative would go down. So the negatives and the positives talk about the direction. Absolute value just talks about how far. Make sense? All right. Now, how do you work with these things? Well, watch. They could give you something like this. Now, obviously, if they just stick a number in there, what is it always? It always comes out to a positive answer, doesn't it? Right? Because distance, or is basically just positive. Let's do this. What if we said that? If I gave you something like that, what you do is this. You don't just change everything inside of there to a positive, even though that technically would work here. All right, it's not always going to work. All right, I promise you. So, but what we do is we work what's inside the absolute value first before we actually apply the absolute value to it. Do you hear what I said? So watch, you keep it absolute value, then you work what's in here. What is just plain old -3 minus 2? It's -5, isn't it? But it's inside absolute value. So now we can apply the absolute value. Once we get one single number inside the absolute value, then we can go ahead and apply it. So what is the absolute value of -5? It's just plain old +5, isn't it? Okay? Now you're looking at this, you can say, yeah, if I just made this positive and this positive, I'd still get a +5. So I could do that, right? But what if you did this? People are looking at this and you're probably thinking, oh, just make that a positive. 3 plus 5 is 8, so that's 8. No, That's right, you don't get the same thing. Whoops, I'm about to sneeze. Hold on. Woo! Thanks. It's recorded forever now. All right, so what do? You work what's inside the absolute value first, don't you? So what is 3 minus 5? It's negative 2, isn't it? Remember, it's still inside the absolute value. Now, once we get one number inside the absolute value, then I can apply what the absolute value says to do. What's the absolute value of negative 2? It's just 2. We good with that? All right. Now, we've done some stuff before. In fact, I think yesterday we did some evaluate problems, didn't we? Where they tell you what x, y is equal to, and then you stick it into the thing. Yep. We're going to do the same kind of thing, except we are going to... let me find an example. Yeah, here's one. Alright, it's the absolute value of a plus b. It's pretty basic, pretty simple. Okay, there's your little expression. It's not really an equality or an equation. It's just an expression, and then it'll say evaluate this. It'll say evaluate, and then it'll say if, and they'll tell you what a and b are equal to, right? So in this case, they say a is 3 and b is negative 7. So this time we're evaluating absolute value. It's the same idea, isn't it? So if you understand how to do absolute value over here, this shouldn't be any more difficult for you. So we plug the numbers in. Keep it absolute value and plug in the number for a. Well, that's a 3, isn't it? Okay, plus b. What's b? It's negative 7. Keep it in absolute value. Now, you don't just go in here and change everything to positives, do you? You work what's inside there first, and then you apply the absolute value. That's right. So negative 4 would be inside the absolute value. But what is the absolute value of negative 4? It's just plain positive 4, isn't it? All right? Make sense? It's pretty simple. Of course, they're going to get a little more complicated than this. All right? But that's your basic idea. All right? So you just take those numbers, plug them in, work out the absolute values first before you do anything else. All right? Let's see. Oh, here's one's a little bit more complicated. And we'll... Oh, sure. They can throw fractions in there. You could get fractions. Sure, you could have, something over something else and that kind of thing. In fact, let's do one of those. Let's pause it and I'll write down the problem. All right, here it is. I've got it's 2 times the absolute value of x minus the absolute value of 3y. And that whole thing is over the absolute value of xy. Basically, it's just plug and chug, isn't it? Just plug some stuff in. Let's see what we got. Now watch. Don't try to do stuff in your head, though. Okay, write down everything. Write down this exact thing, but except instead of having x and y, we're going to replace it with what x and y are equal to. All right? Don't try any shortcuts on this, because you can only get into trouble if you do. So it's 2, and then its absolute value of what? Negative 6 minus absolute value of 3. Now, it's 3 times y, so I'm going to put a parentheses there to show the multiplication. All right, over absolute value of x times y. So again, I'm going to put those in parentheses. Negative 6 times 10. And put that in absolute value. Make sense? All right, now what are we doing here? We haven't seen this yet. It's a 2, then there's nothing in between, then it's absolute value. What does that mean you're doing to those two things? You're multiplying them together, okay? But let's do this again. Yeah, let's do that first. Yeah, let's find the absolute value of negative 6 first. Now, you might be able to do it in your head, and that's okay if you want to, but as far as me teaching it, I'm going to show you every little step, okay? And when you first do these, you probably should write down every step. But if I was to do this myself personally, I would look at this and say, oh, that's negative 6, or that the absolute value of negative 6 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12, and I would just write down a 12. Okay, and eventually you should be able to do that yourself. But I'm going to write it down like this. So it's 2 times what? Positive 6, right? Because the absolute value of negative 6 is 6. Okay, minus, and then it's the absolute value of what? 30. So I just write 30, can't I? I can do that much in my head without writing it down. You understand why it's minus? Because of this. Because a lot of people say, oh, I thought absolute value always had to be positive. Well, this is positive, but there's a minus in front of you. You're subtracting it from something else. So that's why it's minus. You got it? All right, let's do this. It's absolute value of what? Negative 60. What's the absolute value of negative 60? It's just plain old 60, isn't it? Right? So let's do this. This is 12. 12 minus 30 is what? Negative 18, is that right? Over 60. Do we leave it like that, though? Nah, we reduce it. What do you think goes into both of those? Yeah, even bigger than that. 6 goes into both of them, doesn't it? Okay, so 6 goes into this how many times? 3, and then 10, and so there it is. It's negative 3/10. So sure, there's your answer to what you asked earlier. You can have a fraction, definitely. All right. Make sure you always reduce it. Don't leave it 18 over 60. If you get an answer that's 2/4, don't leave it 2/4. Okay, always reduce it. You got it? Not that this 2/4 has anything to do with what we just did, but I'm just saying in general. I believe that's it. Let me take a look. Yeah, you just got a bunch of them. You got 10 of them to do, and it's basically the same thing. Starts off a little easy, and then it gets a little more complicated and starts looking like this a little bit at the end. All right, but you can handle that, can't you? All right, good. That's it.